So, board challenge review. Let's have a look to beginners first. We have an object, right? The user, right? That's an object. And that user has a particularity, something that we haven't explicitly tackled until now, which is that keyword, this. So from now on, you'll be talking about that keyword lots of times, right? So I will give you two advices before talking about any details. Because this is something that you may not notice, but for example, when you are doing a job interview, when you're interviewing someone, you know, sometimes, you know, it's hard to follow because of a couple of basic principles. First of all, when you're talking about that word, please avoid using the word this all the time, right? Like this is an object which is this, right? It's something about semantics. Don't use the word this unless you want to talk about that word, right? Use that or something like that, or something similar, right? The second advice is when you talk about this you see, I mentioned this. When you talk about...
So you mean when you're talking,
yeah.
try to avoid using the word this all the time?
Correct.
Because you don't want to refer to the keyword.
Well,
so you don't want to mix up.
yeah, correct. You don't want to mix things, right? You should mention that word when you talk about the word itself, not when you are explaining. This is you know, it's hard to notice, but when you're interviewing someone, it's like, oh God, right? So I tend to use that. That word refers to, helps a bit. Yeah, something silly, right? And the other one is, if you want to prove, or if you want to give the impression that you really know what that word means, refer to it like, instead of this, refer to it like lexical this. Because that's the correct way, lexical this, right? Cool. So today we'll be talking about lexical this. First of all, what that function returns. Peter, let's have a look. That's correct. That's correct. Let's add a breakpoint on line number 5 to inspect the value of lexical this. Look, lexical this refers to the user itself. That means if I add a new property called last name, how do I access the last name? This dot last name. That's correct, right? Easy, right? Cool. But now the important question is why? Why lexical this refers to the object? This is not always going to be true. But for now, let's assume that theory, that lexical this, yeah, points refers to the user. The correct way to explain what's the value of lexical this is that variable, first of all, it's an object. That's the first thing, right? So lexical this is an object that refers to the object that invoke the function where lexical this is. Let me repeat that, and please write that down. Lexical this is an object that reference, right? It's a reference in memory to another object. Which object? The object that invoked the function where lexical this is. Good? So, why, in that particular scenario, lexical this refers to user. Who is invoking get last name? user. Because of that, lexical this refers to user. Right? That's the most fundamental principle of using lexical this. But now, we planned another, on the intermediate board challenge, we did something a bit different. So essentially, what we did, or let me, no, before going that far, let me do another example. So this is going to be user one. So just with the first name, right? Let's keep it simple. Username, get first name, you know, all these things, right? Get first name, get first name, and then get first name. So I'm going to create another user 2, unsurprisingly, user 2. First name is going to be Mari, right? So obviously, if I run now user2.getFirstName, it will return Mari, right? Even though it's a bit complicated to see at the moment on the screen, but I'll show you in a second. Mari, right? So now my question is, look at what I'm doing at the moment. I'm going to remove that first name on user 2. So now I'm going to do user2.getFirstName equals user1.getFirstName. I'm creating a reference to user1 getFirstName function, and I'll save that reference on user2 getFirstName function. I'm not copying the function, I'm just creating a pointer from here to there. So then the question is, what will that function return? Peter or Mari?
Peter.
Peter. Why Peter?
Because you assign the value of user 1 to user 2, so user 1 is invoked, and that's the object.
Right. Let's do something. You're all wrong, guys. You're all wrong because you probably misunderstood what I mentioned a minute ago. This, lexical this, refers to the object that invoke the function. Who is invoking the function? User 1 or user 2? No, wrong, wrong, wrong. I see a big user 2 here. So user 2 is the responsible of invoking the function. Because user 2 is invoking the function, lexical this will refer to user 2. Yeah? What if I do user 1 dot get first name? It's Peter. That's correct. That's correct. Why Peter? Because of the same reason. Who is invoking get first name? User 1. So then lexical this points to user 1. Right? Again, user 2, get first name. What's the result? Marie, correct. Because who is invoking get first name? User 2. Even if the method belongs somehow to user 1, but that's not important. The important thing is who is actually putting the parentheses. That's the important line, right? User 2. So then this lexical this refers to user 2. Yeah, so what we're doing on line number 13 is we're creating a reference. Yep. So that function is kind of copied here. But it's not actually copied, it's just a reference in memory. Do you remember when we talk about arrays and objects that they are passed by reference instead of by value? So that's the same thing. We are not actually copying it, but we're creating a reference. So now, both user 1 and user 2 have access to that method getFirstName, right? So obviously, if I change something here, for example, if I add an exclamation mark, that will be taken by both user 1 getFirstName Peter exclamation marks. And of course, it will be also taken by user2 dot get first name. That will return Marie with lots of exclamation marks. I'll try again. Right? Any question?
Yeah, I've got a question about the user one
Yep.
first name.
Yep.
When I was stepping through in DevTools,
Yep.
it differentiated user one first name. For a while, it was effectively Peter, and then when we were in the main calls, it was, I think, unavailable.
I need to see that snippet to see what's going on.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think it's related to the scope with let. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we'll do a specific workshop to explain what are the differences between let, bar, and const, right? But that goes beyond the scope of the session. So let's just for now focus on lexical this. Right. So that's essentially how lexical this fundamentally works. But there are some tricks in here, right? We'll cover some of them on Tuesday on the next workshop. But I'd like to introduce some of them. So first of all, on the, let me remove user2. On the intermediate challenge, we got something like that. So let's just keep one user, right? So I think we got here first name equals Boris. And then we got window.get first name equals user.get first name. And then finally we did get first name. What will this return? What will that return? Boris. Let's have a look. That's correct. That's correct. And now the question is, I know some of you understood it returns Boris. What I'm not that sure if anyone really understood why. So the reason is, every time you do something like that, look at line number 9, even line number 11. Something that we ignored, and that may be a bit surprising, is that in JavaScript, everything is actually an object or belongs to an object. So on line number 9, first name equals Boris, if we don't put any let in front of it, in reality, under the hood, it's the same as doing window.first name. Even when we invoke a function like that, that's the same as doing window. So unless you specifically declare that variable as a local, using let, for example, whatever you do is global. Because that's global, can anybody tell me what's the value of lexical this on line number 5?
Window.
Window, that's correct. Who said that?
Jeff.
Jeff is right. Who is invoking get first name? Is the window, right? Let's set a breakpoint on line number 5. Oh, thank you, Chrome. I said line number 5. No? Right. Let's try again. Cool. Here you go. Look. You see? What's window? Window is the root object. It's God, right? Window knows everything. It's the global object. That's correct, right? That's correct. Is generally speaking considered a bad practice to populate the window object, because this is a global. Everyone can access the window object, right? That's not good. You want to namespace. You want to isolate your logic. But even though it's not a good practice, technically speaking, as you can see, we can play with it, right? So that's the window object. Again, what we do here is we created a new variable called first name as part of window, implicitly, right? Because what we had before, we got that, right? That's why it's not that obvious that first name belongs to window, but it does belong to window. That's the first thing. On the next line, we say, okay, I'm not done with the window object yet. Also, add a new variable on the window object, which is a function. And what's the value of the function? Well, keep a reference to whatever getFirstName on the user object is. And finally, because now we already got access to the getFirstName method of the user object, we can invoke it, right? getFirstName, like that, right? And as we explained before, lexical this refers to the object that invoke the function, invoke, parentheses, the function where lexical this is. Any question?
Yes.
Yep.
If after we've made our call to the getFirstName,
Yep.
we changed it,
Yep.
and then used it again.
We change it to what? Like window.get.
Like putting the exclamation marks at the end.
Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. So you want to put exclamation marks at the end of this dot first name, line number 5. Right. What will this function return? With or without the exclamation marks? It will return Boris with the exclamation mark, of course. Why? Because that line will be evaluated at the end on line number 11. On line number 11, this dot first name is Boris. No problem. Boris plus exclamation marks, right? Anything else?
Ricardo, why do we need to write, sorry I missed it, window getFirstName then equal to user getFirstName?
No, why? We don't have to type window. So the only reason why I'm typing window is to prove that implicitly JavaScript, if you don't put window, JavaScript will put it for you, right? If I delete all the windows, it's the same thing, right? You see? That's a bit more natural to read, if you want, but at the same time, it's harder to understand. Because
So
it's...
if we want to get Peter, so we just write user.
Correct, correct. Of course, if you type user.getFirstName, that will return Peter, of course. Because who is invoking getFirstName? User. What's the value of user.firstName? Peter, right?
Peter.
Yeah. So again, even though that's probably a more natural way of writing JavaScript, under the hood, remember, whenever you create some globals, they will be assigned to the window object. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can we delete the second line?
Can we delete the second line? Well, line number 10 or line number... Yeah, okay.
10.
What happened? Right, now this is going to be super confusing. Super confusing. Super confusing. What will this function return? It's a very good...
And what is?
But...
No, it's first name, no. Boris is the first name and window is getFirstName, right?
But does that function exist as part of the window object?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it says window dot first name.
It can't access user, so it's going to throw an error.
So, is that Mo?
Yeah.
What Mo said, that's the most, let me find the word, sensible answer, but it's wrong. So what Mo said is clearly what everyone should be thinking at the moment. That should throw an error, right? Look, we don't have getFirstName at the moment. This is like typing hello Brexit. We never created that function, right? Because of that should throw an error. However, look at what happened. Still works.
I think because global is like default drop down, so if you don't have it inside of the function, it'll go for the value on the outside.
Not really. Not really. That's a nice try, but that's not the reason. Can anyone figure out why that still works? And to make it even worse, if I change Boris to Donald, Look, it's reacting. What's going on?
Is that because it's still stored in the global
Correct.
namespace?
Correct. Is it Richard?
Yeah.
So there is 1 point on the board challenge for Richard, because that's exactly the answer. Window, as we mentioned a minute ago, is a global object, right? Do you remember, starting from the first day, we're surrounding our snippets with curly braces? So the goal of the curly braces is to isolate our snippets, to make everything local. But we can, change that behavior by playing with window. Window is a global object. That means that even if I change things, look, this is mind-blowing. Even if I delete window.firstname equals Donald, that will still return Donald.
Yeah, but I'd like to clarify something, Ricardo.
Yep.
I think it's only working because you've already run through this. If this was a fresh
Of course, absolutely, yeah. Of course, that works.
That's a trick.
Yeah, that works because I play with that. So I already saved these variables into the window object a minute ago, right? But still, that could be a bit confusing, right? Where is Donald coming from? I don't have any Donald, even if I delete that, right? If I show you that snippet, like, can you tell me why this is working? I've never done anything with window, right? According to the snippet, it's not visible, it's not obvious. That's one of the reasons. Say it again?
It's still saved.
It's still saved, yeah. Because I haven't changed the window. So it's still persisted in memory, right? That's why it's not one of the reasons why it's not a good idea to deal with the window object. Any other question? No? It's in a cache, yeah, because the window persists. Unless I close the tab and I open a new tab, the window is still alive.
So window as a global variable, it will not be a long-term variable, it's just something you use the application and upload to that.
Yep. That's the reason.
The files are cached, basically.
Yeah. The global ones are cached. That's why it's a good practice to use curly brackets and also let variables, as we'll be explaining shortly in a future session, right? To keep everything local. So if I change something, nothing is cached. I always get a new version of my logic. Because we got 7 minutes left, I would like to introduce, and that will be covered again next week on Tuesday probably, something slightly different. So that has been the rule in JavaScript during 16 years. So whenever we do that, that returns Peter, right? Because getFirstName is invoked by user. So lexical this refers to user. This.firstName is the same as user.firstName Peter. However, now we can do that. I said 15 years, 16 years, but it's actually 20. Since 2015, we can do that. Does anyone know what the function will return now? There are 2 points on the board challenge for the right answer. You have just one opportunity. Who said undefined?
Undefined.
Daniel, Aisel, undefined. Who is that? Dave?
But did you change the window?
Wait, Ashley? Poppy? Error? Yeah? Poppy, yesterday we watched a horror movie. It was like a child. It was named Poppy. It was like evil, right? He used to kill people and stuff like that. Yeah, she was Poppy. It was interesting. Look cute, like kill people. Right?
So give her 2 points immediately.
Yes. Right.
No, that was just extreme programming. That's
right. So error, undefined. Who else?
I agree with Pop.
So Rafa agrees with Pop. So anyone else?
Error, Natasha.
Natasha, error.
Peter.
Peter. Who said Peter?
Me, Jeff.
Jeff. Peter. Who else? Anyone?
Peter.
Who's that? Mo Peter. Right. No, you can't. Of course, you can't change your mind, right? I hope everybody learns at the end of the bootcamp that you should think twice before giving a wrong answer. Because everyone gave a wrong answer. Literally everybody.
Because it's the same window. You didn't change the window. You used the same snippet.
That's correct. That's correct. Why Donald? Because with arrow functions, up until now, we've assumed that arrow functions are the same as classic functions. We can change them, right?
That's why I asked, have you changed the window?
Yes. Thank you for nothing, Hazel. Right. Up until now, we've assumed that arrow functions and classic functions can be exchanged easily, right? And it was just a matter of syntax sugar readability, but they were the same. That's not true. They're the same most of the time, unless, and that's a subtle but vital concept, especially talking about React, as we'll see next week, unless we have to deal with this, with lexical this. So, we explained that with classic function, lexical this refers to the object that invokes the function where lexical this is. So that will clearly return Peter. However, if we replace classic function with an arrow function, that's not true. That's not true. With an arrow function, it doesn't matter who is invoking the function. It's not relevant. It doesn't care. JavaScript doesn't care who is invoking. So it radically changes the behavior of lexical this. If we use an arrow function, it doesn't matter who is invoking the function. But then, if it doesn't matter, how do we determine the value of lexical this? It will be inherit. Whatever the value of lexical this was outside, on the parent scope, will be inherited here. Because we got nothing outside of this object. What's the root object in JavaScript? Window. That's correct. That's correct. Because we have literally, we don't have any parent scope we can look at, right? This will refer to window. This is not always the case. In React, we'll see what are the different values of lexical this when we use arrow functions. But that will happen next week. For now, just bear in mind that using an arrow functions, we don't care who is invoking the function. We'll just inherit the parent lexical this. If there is no parent lexical this, no problem at all. It will be set to window. As we've been playing with the window object before, we can see that we somehow created first name Donald a few minutes ago. That's why this.firstname equals window.firstname, and that's why it returns Donald. Any question?
Very, very tricky.
It is, well, it makes sense, right? It's just a couple of logical rules we have to learn.
No, it doesn't make sense. This should not be allowed. I think this is witchcraft.
Right. So I understand your point. At the moment, it's hard to see the benefit of using an arrow function because it makes everything.
What's the point of this window?
Yeah, in a real life scenario.
Yeah, right. Next week, we'll see a very good reason of using arrow functions in React. At the moment, it feels a bit weird, like it's just causing problems, right? But it is. And one of the reasons why in the majority of the situations we'll be using arrow functions is because it has a lot of advantages, right? Lots of advantages, and we'll see them, right? So arrow functions are a new thing in JavaScript. Actually, they are called fat arrow functions, inherited from other languages. If you have a bit of programming culture, you may have seen something called thin arrow functions, which are not supported by JavaScript in 2019, but it's just a matter of time that they will be added to the standard one day. Yeah. Yeah. Right, so because we are out of time, next week, actually I wanted to do another example, sorry, I forgot about that. What happened if we got, last question for today, last name, William, and then we display get last name, get last name. What will this function return? Undefined. That's correct. That's correct, because as far as I remember, we've never declared any last name property on the window object, right? Because of that, window object dot something that doesn't exist returns undefined. Let's have a look. That's correct. Undefined. And what happens if now I do window dot last name equals Lancaster? Yeah, look, Lancaster, right?
Yeah.
Because this refers to window, and out of coincidence or not, now we do have a last name property as part of the window object. So it will be just returning that value.
So it doesn't matter if you're, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who is invoking get last name using an arrow function. What happened, just to recap, if I put a classic function, what will this return? What will that return? William. Richard is right again. Right? Because as we are using a classic function, we do care who invoke get last name. Who invoke get last name? User. Okay. Lexical this refers to user. User.last name, William. Right? Cool. Any question? Yep. 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 We'll see that we cannot entirely rely on classic or arrow functions. That will depend on what we are doing, right? I can tell you that next board challenge will learn how to deal with lexical this. Have you ever seen things like .call or .apply or .bind?
Benim çıkmam lazım. Ben gidiyorum klasa 2'den 5'e kadar meetup'ımız var.
Right.
Meetup benim görüşmemiz var.
That's
You're on YouTube.
I hope Acer is not talking about anything private at the moment. Cool. Acer, please remember to mute yourself because all the internet captured that moment. So cool. So next board challenge we'll talk about the differences between call, bind, and apply. And obviously we'll focus on the practical aspect on these things, talking about React. Anything else? No? Cool. Thank you very much. See you later.